So yeah, today we're going to be looking at a video with another doctor. This one is Dr. Paul Mason. The video is titled Logical Fallacies of a Vegan Diet, Why You Shouldn't Feed Your Child a Vegan Diet.
Oh, I can't wait. I cannot wait.
So yeah, let's jump into it. And yeah, hello, CDA Activism. Thanks for waiting. Appreciate you being on the stream. I'm a fan of your work as well.
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's jump in.
So, g'day, I'm Dr. Paul Mason. Now, vegan diets are often promoted as being both healthy and ethical. As you're about to learn, however, this is not necessarily the case. This is a photo of Sheila O'Leary wearing prison greens after her 18-month-old baby died of malnutrition while being fed a vegan diet. Died of malnutrition.
So yeah, I'll get ourselves out of the way there. But like clearly in the description of his source, it says a vegan mum starved toddler to death with a diet of raw vegetables.
That's just so funny. I actually didn't see that. That's actually really funny that it even kind of debunks his fear-mongering just with his own source. Yeah, no one's advocating for a diet of raw vegetables, let alone starving your kid with raw vegetables. Yeah, that's a great call out.
Yeah, I actually made a reel on this earlier on today. I started watching the start and I saw that, so I might upload it a little bit later,
Yeah.
just to make it clear that responsible health professionals are not advocating for starvation, and there's like infinite diets compatible with avoiding the exploitation of sentient beings, the commodification of sentient beings, and a diet of raw vegetables is compatible with veganism, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's health promoting. There are health promoting iterations of diets compatible with veganism, such as generally a healthful plant-based dietary pattern, whilst an Oreo only diet could be compatible with vegan ethics. It might not necessarily be health promoting. Starvation is also compatible with vegan ethics, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's health promoting. And normally the fact that you can find it so easily, the issue which was going on means that it's pretty hard to actually devise a diet which is not health promoting if you're plant-based, because it's just so obvious the few cases, the anecdotes you see online.
Yeah, like whenever they do have like parent feeds kid vegan, kid dies or whatever, right? It's always very obvious. It's not like everyone's scratching their head going, oh man, there's something about a plant-based diet that we just can't figure out. No, they always either underfed them or didn't supplement, or, it's always, I agree, yeah, it's always very obvious. And it's just fear-mongering. It's just, whenever you're talking about something so vague, it's luckily that he kind of gets exposed with his own article title in the corner. But whenever you're talking about something so vague, just fear-mongering. Oh, don't feed your kid a vegan diet or a plant-based diet because they will die. It's like, that's not true. If we're talking anecdotes, my nephew, who is 7, gonna be 8 this year, I think. And he has been vegan his whole life. He hasn't had any animal products, hasn't had any animal flesh, his whole life. So, and again, it's if you feed anyone, a kid or adult, the right amount of calories and you supplement properly, they are gonna be fine. So your kid isn't gonna starve just because you feed them a diet compatible with veganism.
Yeah, and there's lots of studies building evidence base that children can be healthful and a well formulated diet compatible with veganism that meets all the basis. And there's also omnivorous diets can also result in starvation if in cases of undereating. So yeah, any sort of dietary pattern can be dangerous if you're not getting enough calories or not meeting specific nutrient requirements.
Yeah, 100%.
Nutrition while being fed a vegan diet. And this, unfortunately, was not an isolated incident. In fact, after a number of deaths linked to vegan diets, Belgium has now introduced laws where parents face 2 years in jail if they feed their children vegan diets without vitamin supplements and close medical supervision, including regular blood tests.
That's great. Okay. They should have been doing that all along. Like that's the standard, like that's not saying he's almost framing it as in like, there are strict guidelines because of how dangerous plant-based diets are. It's like, no, they are actually putting in the guidelines that you need to meet in order to feed your kid a plant-based diet, or in order to eat a fully plant-based diet. You've got to supplement. And I mean, I guess maybe the regular blood test, if you're supplementing, might be a little much, but I don't think that's a bad thing. If you got to supplement, you've got to eat enough food, you got to make sure your levels are good, and that's it. Yeah, that's not a scary thing at all.
Yeah, and I don't know how true that is, whether or not Belgium have, legalized that, but all reasonable vegans, promote or say supplementation for vitamin B12 in cases where people are not getting enough vitamin D or iodine, through fortified foods or supplements. This is a requirement, and
again, it almost seems like. Again, he's framing it in a way that like parents who feed their kid a vegan diet or a plant-based diet want their kids to starve or something. And these guidelines are in place to prevent that. That's not true. In fact, and that's a good point. Yeah, we don't know how true it is, but let's just grant that what he's saying is true. These guidelines, if anything, are going to help parents who do want to raise their kid in a way that's compatible with veganism to actually do it in a more educated, in a safer way. I think that's if those guidelines are in place, that's great. I think that it should be, parents need to be educated on supplementation, on how to eat plant-based better. All parents should be educated better on nutrition in general, but I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, and on to your point about guidelines, I saw a recent paper this week where looking at children and high adherence to just dietary guidelines in general led to less hospital visits for these children. So yeah, high adherence to the actual guidelines seems to be resulting in better health outcomes generally. And as CDA activism is implying there, even omnivores take supplements.
Yeah, I was gonna say, looking back to what I ate as a kid. We're acting as if like parents who aren't vegan, they're like the best, like they track all their food and they're feeding their kids the healthiest diet on earth. No, most parents don't meet the guidelines. Most kids probably aren't meeting the guidelines for like fruit, vegetable, whole grain intake. So again, it's just fear mongering. It's just looking at this specific group of people and saying, hey, this is extra dangerous. It's like, no, it's not.
And even if a vegan diet doesn't kill, it can still lead to severe and often permanent consequences. No parent should ever have to live with the knowledge that they've caused their child permanent brain damage.
So while I was waiting, I actually opened up these different articles he's citing at the start. So I can have a look at this article here. I've got it. And normally, as we said, you can sort of find the problem in the article. Okay, so it says, O'Leary and her 33-year-old husband told police that they fed their child a diet of raw fruit and vegetables. So there you have it.
That's it. Yeah, you don't need to read anymore. Yeah, again, this raw fruit and vegetable, that's not going to be enough. What kid's going to be able to get enough nutrients and sustain themselves on raw fruits and vegetables? Let alone adults. At least with adults, they're like consenting and they can figure it out if they want. If you want to do like a raw vegan diet, which I would probably advise against, but yeah, no, that's the issue right there.
And yeah, I've got three more articles open, so that we'll see.
Oh, perfect.
Damage. Nor should they have to watch their toddler's bones snap under the weight of their own body.
Okay, let's check this one. So vegan parents sentenced for allowing a toddler to become so malnourished, her bones fractured. Okay.
Quick call out about that. What's interesting about that is actually in factory farming for chickens, oftentimes egg-laying hens, they end up, their bones end up breaking over the weight of their own bodies because they grow so quickly and they lay so many eggs that they lose nutrients and they don't have strong enough bones to sustain their weight. So it's interesting how he is shedding light on how horrible an experience it is to have your bones break because of your own body weight. And then that same thing we see over and over and over again for egg-laying hens in the factory farming industry. So that's
great point.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Thanks for bringing awareness of that. And yeah, just I'm having a quick browse of this article, and it says that she was not up to date with vaccinations. The parents had been inconsistent and untruthful, and had told authorities their daughter sometimes ate meat products, but was awaiting vaccinations. So yeah, there's some red flags here.
Yeah, in the link to the bottom left, it says unvaccinated bone disease rickets. So yeah, there's a lot of red flags when it comes to that, like they're like anti-vaxxers. But also, what kind of doctor or scientist or anybody uses news headlines to say anything truthful? Like we already know that news headlines are usually some kind of exaggeration to draw in attention, to get people to click on the article or whatever. So the fact that this doctor is using news headlines to conclude any type of truth claim or come to anything truthful, I think is already dishonest.
That's such a great point, because reasonable doctors won't just take screenshots of
the headlines,
headlines, and it's just anecdotes go in every sort of direction possible, and it's just like trying to make sense of gibberish, really.
Yeah.
Sure. So
both consequences of vegan diets. So how is it then that diets which are promoted for their health benefits could be dangerous to children? Well, it comes down to nutrients, or more specifically, the lack thereof. The most well-known being vitamin B12. There's an awful lot of misinformation surrounding whether or not plant-based foods have B12. So I'll make it simple. There is none. So I'll make it simple. Surrounding whether or not plant-based foods have B12. So I'll make it simple. There is none.
All right, so first of all, he said the lack thereof, just a little bit earlier on with regards to the nutrients. You can just go on Cronometer, a formulated plant-based, exclusive plant-based diet that meets all the bases, can get all the essential nutrients. And then regarding B12, who cares, right, if you can synthesize it? And even it's like made by bacteria, but who cares when you can just take a supplement and not have to pay for an animal to be killed?
Yeah, and we know like most kids are picky eaters. Like most kids are not going to be tracking their own food in Cronometer and being like, oh, I got to make sure I eat more of this. No, they usually hold on to very specific foods that are either comforting for them or taste good to them. So kids should be supplementing anyway, whether you're vegan or omnivorous. You should probably, if not via fortified foods, which most kids get through like cereals, it should be a supplement. Like they make gummy. I don't know if you have this in Europe, but they have Flintstones gummies here, which are made. They're like gummy vitamins in the shape of like the Flintstone characters. Who do you think they're making that for? Right? Like why do we have these gummies? It's not just for vegans, right? They're not even vegan gummies. They're for kids who may not be getting all of the nutrients they need from their diet, specifically of, French fries and chicken nuggets. You know what I mean? So again, most kids should probably be supplementing anyway, and they make vegan kid supplements. So it seems simple. They have vegan gummy vitamins and supplements. So why wouldn't you just feed them 2 of those a day and you're done?
Yeah, and I believe there's some people who can also have better absorption with the synthetic vitamin B12, because some of the ones in animal flesh, the vitamin B12 in animal flesh, it can be harder to liberate, I've heard. So,
yeah, I think Vegan Gains has that. I thought he talked about it, where he's one of the people who has to get a supplement or has to get a shot because he won't get it properly from food. So that's interesting. Yeah, I have heard that too.
But yeah, I think there's some people who get part of their intestine removed, like need shots, right?
Interesting.
Of B12. Okay. Yeah. Like I need to double check this, but yeah, I've heard of this.
The amount of B12 you see in the foods on screen here is exactly 0. And the deadliness of B12 deficiency has been known for a long time.
I'll just add that there could actually be some trace amounts. It won't be enough to satisfy your daily needs to take a supplement, but there could be some trace amounts there.
Long time. In fact, there's a condition where vitamin B12 cannot be effectively absorbed into the body called pernicious anemia. Pernicious, quite literally meaning deadly.
So pernicious anemia, you get it when it's like it's a symptom of B12 deficiency, and it's called pernicious anemia because it seems very similar to normal anemia.
Interesting. Okay.
Or harmful. And for a long time, this disease, pernicious anemia, was universally fatal. I'll say that again. universally fatal. It was only in 1925, when the use of beef liver extracts containing B12 began to be injected, that pernicious anemia ceased to be universally deadly. The discovery, in fact, led to the awarding of the 1934 Nobel Prize.
So that's interesting. Pause it for a
The
second.
fact is,
So number one, this is just more fear mongering. Again, we haven't even discussed like the very easy way for you to avoid a B12 deficiency on a whole food, on a plant-based diet. But also it's interesting how he said that they kind of came up with like a B12 supplement in 1934. Yeah, like I feel like he's trying to demonize or talk poorly about plant-based diets because we need supplementation, but now he's kind of talking about how good it was that there was a B12 supplement that was created and they won an award. And like I feel like I don't really know, like, does he think B12 supplements are good? Does he think they're bad? Like, his message is kind of confusing. And also I find that interesting because most low carbers or most carnivore dieters I know, they always like to talk about how little disease there was or how much meat we used to eat and had no heart disease in the early 1900s or the early 1800s. But clearly there were people getting B12 deficiencies even back then, to the point where they had to invent a B12 supplement to prevent a pernicious anemia. So again, it's just more like conflicting information. Was there disease back then or wasn't there? Based on a lot of their claims, oh, no, as long as you eat meat, everything's fine. You don't get any disease. You don't have to worry about any of this. But clearly, in 1934 and way prior to that, people were dying of pernicious anemia. So, it's very conflicting information.
Yeah, and if someone's got a deficiency in B12, a reasonable doctor, health professional would recommend to take a supplement rather than saying, go eat some animal flesh, right? It's way more reliable, as you mentioned.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a great point. Yeah, because you can't rely on individuals to make like changes, like big dietary changes like that. But you can rely on a supplement, on like a consistent dose that you give somebody that's going to cure their deficiency. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and food is less reliable than a supplement, right? Because supplements, they also have some variability, but it would be like in terms of degree of confidence that you'll be getting vitamin B12, I would feel more, confident taking a supplement.
Yeah, 100%, exactly.
It's impossible to get adequate B12 from any plant food that has not been specifically fortified. And please don't believe the lie that you can get enough B12 from the dirt of unwashed vegetables. This is simply untrue.
Yeah, I agree. I really dislike it when plant-based dieters say just eat unwashed vegetables for B12. I think it's a dangerous thing. Just take a supplement or eat fortified food 3 times a day and you're sorted.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's no reason to roll the dice on that.
Eating dirt can't save an unsupplemented vegan diet. And it wasn't until 1972 when B12 was finally synthesized in the lab. And after this, following a vegan diet theoretically became possible longer term. And when I say longer term, I mean for more than about 5 years, because that's about how much B12 can be stored in the liver. So how does a well-balanced vegan diet, as promoted by the likes of Dr. Michael Greger here, reconcile with the B12 deficient nature of a vegan diet? Well,
so they never show a vegan bodybuilder, right?
Yeah. No, and I always hate when they put Dr. Greger up there because they know what they're doing. Like, I know they would never openly say it. Well, some of them do actually, but I know he would never openly say it, but they're like body shaming him. They're literally like making fun of the way somebody looks to prove like their bias, even though again people look different. Like Dr. Greger looks the way he looks. That doesn't mean he's not. It doesn't mean what he's saying is wrong. Doesn't mean that plant-based diets are deficient or harmful. I don't get that. Like, yeah, is he the best looking guy I've ever seen? No. But is he also the most unhealthy or like the worst looking guy? No. He just looks how he looks. Leave him alone. You know what I mean?
But yeah, looks are subjective as well. And Dr. Greger, I've never actually seen him promote ethics. So from what I know, he promotes more of a whole food plant-based diet. I haven't seen him. I know I have one friend who mentioned that he saw some content of him talking about ethics sometime, but yeah, I don't know if he's ethically vegan or if he's just a supporter of plant-based diets for health reasons.
I feel like I've heard him talk about ethics too. But yeah, all of his content is based around the nutrition. But I feel like, I don't know if it was in a documentary, or I feel like I've heard him talk about ethics too. But maybe.
Yeah, I had a friend mention this, so yeah, if you find it, we can have a watch sometime.
Cool. Yeah, I'll look for it.
Well, understand that the phrase well-balanced is really code for needs supplementing, either in the form of foods which have had B12 artificially added, or simply by taking B12 supplements themselves. And here's the rub.
Well-balanced needs supplementing, like theoretically, a vegan diet could meet all the, the adequate needs through fortification. So it depends if you count that as a supplement, but
again, like, it's just all of these buzzwords, artificial, synthetic, like, this doesn't actually tell us anything about the health outcomes when implementing these, like a supplement in a population, or like, it doesn't, he's just fear mongering. He's just trying to say, look, this is kind of scary, and it's just better to just eat meat and get everything you need. Don't eat the artificial, synthetic, lab synthesized, fortified vitamin B12. Like, who cares? Who cares about that? I don't. Especially when we look at it from veganism, which is now wanting to contribute to the exploitation of animals. Give me the pill. I'm good. Give me the fortified nutritional yeast. That's so good. I eat nutritional yeast every single day because it's so high in protein and it's so good.
Yeah. And the point I was making was more that I take supplements because but because I also eat fortified food, I don't actually know if I need the supplement. It's more like a backup.
Yeah. You're saying like if you planned it right, you could probably get away with just fortified foods and not actually having to take a multivitamin or like a pill. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Like salt, you can get iodine through salt.
Mm-hmm.
So algae is an unreliable source, I would say. But if you're having iodized salt, you could it might. And then for vitamin D, if you have it in your milk, if you get so there's some plant milks, I think, with vitamin D.
High in vitamin D too.
If you're also going outside. So theoretically, it could be possible. But just to be clear for everyone watching, I advocate supplementing.
Yeah, me too.
And CDA activism says honey is not vegan.
Yeah, you
that's
made
a great
mistake
point
on that one, huh? He's like, that's a funny call out, yeah. Because he's like, what's vegan? He's like, soy milk, margarine. He's like, and honey crunch cornflakes. It's like, nope, messed that one up.
Yeah, that's a great point.
On the foods which have had B12 artificially added, or simply by taking B12 supplements themselves. And here's the rub. Even though it's universally accepted that plant-based diets are deficient in B12, necessitating supplementation, and the supplements are both cheap and readily available, the rate of B12 deficiencies in vegetarians, let alone vegans, is staggering. Try 62% of pregnant females, or up to 86% of vegetarian children, or 90% of the elderly. Consider for a moment.
So yeah, when they normally flash up these statistics, like, you need to take into account whether they were supplementing, because even vegetarians, they will benefit. As we've talked about, all sorts of dietary groups could benefit from a supplement. So just these raw statistics, I'll have to have a look at that paper specifically, but just generally, there's papers in which vegans who supplement have higher B12 status than meat eaters. There's studies with cereal with fortified vitamin B12 where the babies who were fed fortified cereal had higher status than meat eaters. So
and it's again, it's just looking at, like, without even having to look at the study, we could give 10 different reasons as to why those statistics, if they're accurate, may have been the case. Because the way that he frames it is also kind of misleading, because he's saying, okay, plant-based diets are deficient because they require supplementation, which I already disagree with. Lifting Vegan Logic always points that out. He has a great statement where he's like, if you supplement, then it's no longer deficient, So like, if it requires supplementation and you include that supplement, then you have a complete diet. So that's already irrelevant. But he words it in like, okay, you need the supplement or else you're deficient. Okay. He's saying the supplement is cheap and easy to produce. Okay, those are pros. And then he words it, he's saying, despite how cheap and easy it is to produce a supplement, vegetarians or these populations of people are still deficient. He doesn't actually tell us if those people were supplementing. Most likely, actually weren't. I think what his point is, hey, people, even though this supplement is so readily available, people are still deficient and they're not taking the supplement. But just because something is cheap and readily available, A, doesn't mean people are educated, right? Most people are not properly educated on nutrition or supplementation. B, it doesn't mean the individuals are going to do what they need to do, right? How many people don't exercise is free? How many people don't walk? How many people are sedentary? Like, that doesn't actually tell us anything. So I would love to see if they were supplementing B12. Maybe they were, but the way that he's framing it, he almost makes us want to think that they were supplementing and were still deficient, but he never actually says that. He says it's cheap and easy to get, but despite how cheap and easy it is to get, people are still deficient. He doesn't say they were taking it and are still deficient. He's trying to say like, oh, people aren't, you know what I mean? The way that he's framing it is just kind of misleading.
And it's a literature review. So literature reviews, it's like a really low level of evidence because people can pick and choose what they put into it. It's like, it's like towards the bottom of the hierarchy. So, and then, if you do supplements count as food. So the diet is not deficient, right? Because if you're taking a vitamin to make up for what your diet doesn't include, then your diet is no longer deficient in that specific vitamin.
Yeah, hold on, I'm just reading something. Here, look, this is great. Look, so right at the bottom of that I don't know if that's the abstract, but right at the bottom of the first paragraph, it says, the main finding of the review is that vegetarians develop B12 depletion or deficiency regardless of demographic characteristics, right? Place of residency, age, or type of vegetarian diet. Vegetarians should thus take preventative measures to ensure adequate intake of this vitamin, including regular consumption of supplements containing B12. So they're in their review, they're not saying they were looking at people who were supplementing. They're saying, hey, vegetarians, because they're not supplementing, are deficient, so they should probably supplement. So you see what I mean? Like, the whole framing is like, instead of looking at, oh, okay, as long as you take the supplement, you're good. He's trying to like fearmonger and frame it in a way that's like, this supplement is cheap and easy and people are still deficient, but they weren't actually taking it, from what it's framed out in the literature review. So yeah, it's just weird. Like, just seems very dishonest to me.
Yeah, and I would guess it's cross-sectional data, essentially just looking at a snapshot in time. But I need to have a look at the study, and it's a great spot. I need to have a proper look to read the studies. But as you said, my gut feeling is that some of the studies included might be cross-sectional, where you just take a group of people and have a look at a small, snapshot in time at their levels. But I need to dive into it. But the people writing the paper, that's a great spot that even they don't say they should eat animal flesh. They just say regular consumption of supplements containing B12. So
yeah, easy. Like, again, it's just more of a misleading framing and fear mongering, but interesting.
Or 90% of the elderly. Consider for a moment that if vegetarians and vegans fail to supplement with a nutrient known to be essential, that is cheap and easy to get, what does it mean for other less well-known nutrients that are only found in animal foods? Grass-fed steak, for example, contains vitamins D, B12, K2, and A. The omega-3 fats EPA and DHA12. Grass-fed steak, for example, contains vitamins D, B12, K2, and A.
So vitamin K2, it's not really absorbable to the form in animal flesh. It's like MK4, and it's not too absorbable. And
And I mentioned this before with a different carnivore YouTuber, but when we're looking at steak, vitamin A is not a great source of vitamin A. Like, it's a very small source. Maybe with grass-fed, again, like you've mentioned before, sometimes the amounts are higher. But I would not say that steak, like a ribeye or sirloin steak, is high in vitamin A. And you could check that in Chronometer. It's a pretty low source, at least compared to what like your daily what you should be getting on a daily basis. It's low. You would still need something else.
And omega-3 as well is very low. Just taken out, like an algal oil supplement has like 250 milligrams of DHA, for example, or it depends on which one you're buying, but compared to, it just completely dwarfs what you're getting from some animal flesh.
Yeah, it's like I don't know why we're talking about steak that has all of these vitamins like sprinkled in there, like barely enough to hit any percentage of your daily allowance. Like, are you just saying it just to make it sound better? Because that's what it seems like. Like, are you actually looking at the amount consumed in like from like a practical standpoint of like how much steak you need to eat to get enough vitamin A? Or it sounds like he's just saying that to make steak, to like glorify this superfood. You know what I mean?
And regarding vitamin A, all the cases of toxicity I've seen have been with eating, liver. Like, I haven't seen a single case of vitamin A toxicity from eating plants. So that's something else to bear in mind.
Yeah.
There was a stream recently on the Lifting Vegan Logic channel, and one of the guests brought up a good point, is that when these people bring up, vitamins that we don't know about, like how far do they go? Like, will they, because there could be vitamins in anything which you don't know about, dirt as well.
Oh yeah, you're talking about I got to that point. I haven't watched the whole stream, but you're talking about when they were reviewing the Chaffee debate. Yeah. No, that was a great point. Yeah, he's like, why does this only apply to meat? Right? Like these unknown vitamins, why wouldn't it also apply to plants or to rocks? Yeah, he said like rocks. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Like there could be phytonutrients that we don't know about, which could extend life in plants. New polyphenols, so many different, phytonutrients that we probably haven't discovered yet. And who knows? Also, there's probably other chemicals we don't know about. So it can go in either direction. So it just seems a little bit silly to just speculate when we can just look at health outcomes and just see which foods are generally the most health promoting when consumed with greater consumption, when doing comparisons.
No, 100%. Yeah, and especially at least if you're going to speculate, be fair. Speculate in all areas. Don't just speculate in one direction. That's just bad speculation too.
That are only found in animal foods. Grass-fed steak, for example, contains vitamins D, B12, K2, and A. The omega-3 fats EPA and DHA, creatine, carnosine, carnitine, choline, heme iron, taurine, and zinc, all of which are either absent.
So I did see a paper that when you cook flesh, like the creatine, it gets converted to something else. So the amount you're getting is much lower. And in general, either way, like the amount of like animal flesh you need to eat to get 5 grams of creatine, which is in the supplement, is like so much. And omnivores, they take creatine as well. And then heme iron, for example, there's some potential links with it. Some people are speculating potentially it could be not too good for cardiovascular health. And then you can get adequate zinc without having to consume meat. What else did he mention?
It's only in a diet. It's only when you're advocating a diet where you're eating nothing but kilograms worth of red meat every single day could you possibly imagine getting enough creatine from red meat. Again, even if we're looking at omnivorous diets, we're looking at diets still filled with helpful plants like whole grains, fruits, vegetables. Only in the carnivore diet are people advocating for nothing but red meat and multiple pounds of red meat every day. That's crazy. Again, I still don't get how this is like a growing thing, but whatever. I guess.
And the other things he mentioned, such as carnosine. Did he mention carnitine as well?
Probably.
Yeah. So carnitine, taurine, they're not essential, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they do that all the time, dude. They do that all the time.
And I think Dr. Nagra also mentioned it in the stream I was talking about on the Lifting Vegan.
The energy drinks or whatever. Yeah.
No, I was saying Dr. Nagra, I think he mentioned in the stream on the Lifting Vegan Logic channel that carnitine is not, carnitine in excess. There's some links, I think it was carnitine, but that it could have poor greater consumption could be associated with poorer outcomes for cardiovascular health. But
interesting. I thought you were referring to when he said that when they talked about how taurine's only found in meat, and Dr. Matthew Nagra actually was like, how many energy drinks have taurine in them? Like there's taurine added, like fortified in all types of stuff. So that's also not true. Yeah, I don't get it. But hey, can you, before we start, can you give me just 1 second?
Yeah, no worries.
All right, cool. Give me 1 moment.
But yeah, guys, don't have you got any questions or? Yeah, that's a great point. Always have to direct them onto the health outcomes details. Yeah, it's always important to look at what actually happens in the grand scheme of things in terms of actual health, rather than speculating on mechanisms. No nooch is bad news. Yeah, I don't have nooch too much, but yeah, it's definitely nice. I like to put it on top of legume pasta, so it gives it quite a nice flavor, and then it's also fortified in a few B vitamins, B12. CDA activism says, my mom would watch this and believe this clown. Okay. Well, hopefully maybe afterwards you can show your mom our reaction and maybe she'll be convinced the other way. This is, I guess, why we do these reactions.
Yeah, parents are funny. My mom used to make some outlandish claims from what she saw on TV, so parents are really funny.
Or deficient on a plant-based diet. So here's a question. How can a vegan diet possibly be the healthiest diet for humankind when without artificial supplementation, it will eventually kill you?
Just look at health outcomes, and then who cares if without supplementation you will die, when you can just look at the health outcomes of people consistently supplementing, because in the grand scheme of things, you'll have a supplement available to you the whole of your life, unless you're on a desert island.
Yeah, no, again, it's just more this whole talk of like death. He's like constantly repeating this. Like he even that slide of like an open grave in like a cemetery. It's like, again, no, this is just silly. Like, I don't know why. There's no need for the theatrics here. Let's just look at the data.
Yeah, I've traveled quite a bit. I've been fortunate to travel quite a bit, and supplements, yeah, they're always available wherever you are. I haven't had any issues.
Yeah, and the way I order my supplement, I get a 2-month supply in one bottle. So I just bring that wherever I go. I mean, I'm not going to be traveling for more than 2 months, or if I was, like you said, you could just go to the local drugstore and find a supplement. So
now you may be sitting there thinking, yeah, that makes sense, and yet still be a bit confused at how plant-based advocates can cite piles of seemingly valid science. Well, they do this by relying on poor quality science. Meet the evidence pyramid, more formally known as the research hierarchy. Down the bottom, we've got the lowest level of evidence. The middle layer, in light blue, refers to a weak type of research known as observational or epidemiological studies.
So he didn't explain why he thinks it's weak, because there can be great observational studies which are just for confounders, and you can sort of infer causality from them, and then because you can do long studies through an observational nature to get an idea of exposure. And then epidemiology, also randomized controlled trials are actually classed as epidemiology. So when people say, criticize epidemiology, that if they don't actually be clear with what they're saying, they're actually criticizing randomized controlled trials as well, because they're actually classed as epidemiology.
No, it's a great call out. Yeah, that's good to know. I actually didn't know that for a long time until I heard, I forgot who said it, but yeah, that's a great call out. And also, what in the hypocrisy is this? You know what I mean? Like, he's using headlines to try and prove something about vegan diets, and here he is saying, these plant-based advocates, they use something really weak called epidemiology. It's like, you just showed some headlines on the slides. What are you talking about?
And there are also randomized controlled trials, which also support more plant-based, dietary patterns.
Yeah.
Now, the ranking of observational studies down from the top of the hierarchy reflects their limitations. As the name suggests, they involve the observation of populations.
He actually missed the meta-analyses there, like above the randomized controlled trials.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I actually just had that thought too. So I don't know. This is also kind of a weird pyramid.
So you can do meta-analyses of observational studies, and you can also do meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials. And yeah, they're not there.
Limitations. As the name suggests, they involve the observation of populations, and relationships between observations are then interpreted. For example, the rate of cancer might be compared to the number of bananas eaten. It's important to understand, though, that just because two observations associate together provides no evidence that one caused the other. Observational research cannot...
Do you have any idea why you just had a cat on the roof?
Yeah, no, I don't know if he's saying, like, maybe he's saying that the cat didn't cause the dent, even though it looks like the cat caused the dent. Like, maybe he's saying, like, just because the cat is on a dented roof doesn't mean they... I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. That's weird. That's super funny.
Prove anything. In a legal sense, observational research provides circumstantial evidence. And while observational studies do have a place, they really ought to be backed up by experimental research. And any researcher who uses observational evidence to prove causation is not only scientifically incompetent, they probably don't like cats. And here's the rub.
So I'll just quickly add that there's actually a good degree of concordance between randomized controlled trials and observational studies when they are matched for things, when you compare like dietary intake and observational study with dietary intake in the randomized controlled trial. There's someone called Lucas Schrimshackle, he's got a paper on this, and they've got a great degree of concordance. And in terms of when they say it cannot prove causation, like even randomized controlled trials, they're just looking at correlations. Like the whole of science is basically based on correlations. Like it's never possible completely to, as far as I've seen, to just like through a randomized controlled trial prove that something is like directly the cause.
Yeah, it's just a what's it called? It's just like a word game where like I feel like it's a given in nutritional science, right? Obviously we got to say it, and they do say it in the studies, but it's like a given that all of these are like strong associations or like really good inferences based on the research. But now all of these low carbers are coming out being like, actually, the truth is that they cannot infer cause. It's like, yeah, we know that. Like nobody's really, like I feel like again, it's like they're like a white knight, like they're coming to save innocent people from the misinformation. It's like, no, that's not true. And yeah, I think especially when you have like hundreds of thousands of people worth of observational studies, and especially when they adjust for confounding factors, it's really good research. Like I don't think you could just discount, just because it's observational, like, hey, this doesn't mean anything. It's got to be a direct experiment,
Yeah, I'd like to personally learn more about causality. I want to read a few books on this topic, but like, as I understand, a lot of the times you infer causality. So you look at the available data, and based on the associations, you have like more confidence towards saying something is causal. But yeah, I'd like to learn more about it to see if this is correct what I'm saying or not. But yeah, everything in science is just based on observations. Yeah, this is what I've learning science has taught me. Like based on correlations, then you apply models. It's based on what you've observed, and then you refine them as you get new data.
Yeah, I know. I think a lot of what they're looking for is like, okay, you eat the piece of meat and then you get cancer. Like that, like 100% of the time, that's what happens, and it's just not how that works.
Yeah, like there's a dose, and then there's so many different factors, right? It can also be some genetic variability for different outcomes. Such as I think certain people might have a certain like genetic a higher chance of getting certain cancers just based on their genetics, and then like some people can smoke their whole lives and not get lung cancer. So
yeah,
but these people, they won't say that means it's okay to smoke, right?
Right, or smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. Yeah.
Like there can be so many different things in the causal pathway which sort of like increase the risk or decrease the risk, and it's like, that's how I understand it anyway.
Yeah.
Whenever you see headlines demonizing red meat, they refer to either a link or an association. And when you see these words, you know that the research was observational, and therefore the conclusions drawn are almost certainly meaningless. Another issue is that much of the observation
So, yeah, he didn't provide an argument as to why the associations are meaningless, or in his view, because, as I mentioned earlier on, there's a great degree of concordance where the results of observation, like in terms of the relative risk or hazard ratio, seems to be very similar to randomized controlled trials.
Observational research on nutrition is performed using self-reported food frequency questionnaires, as if asking someone how many eggs they consumed in the previous 12 months could be in any way reliable. Bear in mind that most people struggle to remember what they've had for breakfast.
So a lot of these food frequency questionnaires, they actually ask you to recall what you've eaten sort of in a weekly basis, or so it's not like, what did you eat 1 year ago?
Yeah, again, the way that he's framing it is definitely misleading. Yeah, it's not like that. They usually, not only are they more, not only are the food frequency questionnaires more frequent than that, but I've seen studies where they actually, I don't know what, I'm not too familiar with it, but I've seen where they do like a
calibration, where they sort of weigh food, maybe.
Yeah, where they like check in on the individual participants in the study, and they like calibrate. Yeah, they actually like verify. They see what they're eating, or like, and then they compare it to the food frequency questionnaire, and then they adjust based on like how they answered and what they were acting. Like there's a lot of complex like adjustments and math that go into it. It's not as simple as, oh, what did you eat in the last year? And then based on what they said, they're like, oh, well, you got cancer, so it must be, like there's this. It's a lot more to it.
And just in case the unreliability of food frequency questionnaires doesn't confound findings enough, researchers often conflate things like pizzas, hot dogs, and hamburgers with red meat. And you don't need an overpriced research degree to know that this kind of conflation is not scientifically valid. People eating hamburgers are probably also having a side of Coke and fries. This is called confounding, and it's impossible to control adequately.
So, there's studies which can adjust for things such as energy intake, consumption of refined sugars, and so this is sort of adjusting for these sort of things that Dr. Mason is mentioning. And then food frequency questionnaires, what they do is they measure contrast in exposure. So he has often an argument as to why they don't manage to do this, because the whole aim is just to see, identify people who consume more of a specific food and then look at the outcomes of them. And so the whole idea is just to generally record people who consume more, that whether they, correctly tick that. And this is where, the calibration comes in, which we've talked about.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me.
Furthermore, how should you categorize this pizza?
Oh yeah, I'll also add that there's papers which adjust for, things such as when they're used as when animal flesh is used as topping, or animal derived products are used as toppings, and it still finds an increase in risk.
Or red meat and processed meat. I know that's a pretty common adjustment too. It's just like, what I want to know is, what's his alternative, right? Like, so he's got all these critiques for this observational research that shows the foods he wants to eat are leading to worse health outcomes, right? So what's his alternative, right? Has he ever proposed like, oh, no, let's use this more reliable research? I don't think so, right? I think his thing is he's critiquing the data because it goes against his own personal bias, but there's no other alternative. Like, this is how you do nutritional science. Like, are you aware of anyone who's come up with any other alternative for like nutritional research?
Yeah, and his alternative seems to just, so far, the only evidence he's really put on the table is a few headlines, right? Hasn't really offered any.
Right. Like, is his alternative just speculation and mechanisms? Like, because that's way lower on the evidence hierarchy. So, I always get so curious about that, because they're always like, well, the science is bad. Okay, what would be good science to you? And then they either tell you something that they know doesn't happen or can't happen, and no other field has ever required it to happen, like a 50-year-long randomized control trial in like a ward with twins or something crazy. Or they don't have an alternative. They look at isotopes. They say, well, actually, we should just eat how we ate a million years ago. It's like, okay, so you know what I mean? Like, it's if you don't have an alternative, then the critique may be valid, but like, what are you suggesting? You know?
Have you seen any members of the carnivore community, drink out of ponds or anything like this?
No, I haven't.
Or
No,
drink,
I haven't.
or like how far do they take it, right?
Yeah. That's always a funny question. It's like, do they have bathrooms in their home? Do they filter their water? Yeah.
Do they drink their own urine?
Right.
Pizza with ham and pineapple. Putting aside the fact that they're probably a bad person, does it get classed as a fruit or a vegetable or a meat? We also have something called healthy user bias, where non-meat eaters are more likely to engage in healthy behaviours. So when we're constantly bombarded with messaging telling us that red meat is bad, it's individuals who care about their health who are most likely to limit their red meat intake. So it ends up that the people who eat less meat.
So healthy user bias, it's generally used to mean when people sign up for a study that they are more likely to be healthy. And then what he's talking about, things such as physical activity, the papers actually adjust for this as well. So they stratify by people consuming, people performing, different types of or different amounts of activity per week. So this is also something which is adjusted for.
But also, if meat was so health promoting, right? If it was such a superfood, so health promoting, even with people who are doing other healthy activities like exercising, like not smoking, if plants were really trying to kill you, which we don't know if that's what Paul Mason believes, but he clearly, subscribes to some of that like anti-nutrient thing, then wouldn't you still expect to see some negative health outcome for taking out meat or for reducing the consumption of meat based on their logic? Like if the meat is so health promoting and plants cause so many issues, whether it's, digestion issues, and things with nutrient absorption, protein deficiency, because they're incomplete proteins, whatever they think, you'd still expect to see that. So again, even if, what he's saying, like they are healthier, people who don't eat meat or eat less meat also do more healthy activities outside of that, you'd still expect to see a detriment, I think, based on their logic.
Yeah, and even just among the people who are healthier, the ones who are consuming more plant-based, generally in the study seem to be healthier as well. So
meat are also more likely to diligently exercise, buy organic foods, and sleep 8 hours every night. So instead of observational research, we should seek out randomized controlled trials, shown here in yellow. And unlike observational studies, these can control for the effects of confounders. In a randomized controlled trial, subjects, along with all of their confounding variables, are randomly allocated to one of two groups. And with enough numbers, this random allocation means that the confounding variables are evenly distributed and therefore don't affect the study results. This research design is considered gold standard, and unlike observational studies, randomized controlled trials can show causation. In effect, randomized controlled trials trump observational research, hands down. As an aside, you might be wondering, what is at the very top of the pyramid? Well, systematic reviews are when researchers collate all the available evidence using unbiased search criteria. The problem is that even when well performed, a systematic review can only be as good as the quality of included studies. Remember, garbage in, garbage out.
It's so funny because earlier on he actually shared not a systematic review, but a narrative review, which is even lower in the hierarchy because it's not a meta-analysis, it's just collating studies.
Yeah, no, there's so many, like, they have so much confusing, or they use, what am I trying to say? They have such a confusing message. They say, okay, well, meta-analysis are the highest of the list, but if you have the weak studies in the meta-analysis, but then earlier he shows what did you say, a literature review? So
it's like a narrative review on B12.
So he shows a narrative review, doesn't talk about the individual strength of the studies in there, just shows essentially like a pop-up of like some kind of, essentially it's just another form of a headline because he's not actually going into the studies or the information. So again, he's essentially saying that I think it's like a contradiction. He's saying that headlines and literature reviews are and are not adequate evidence for claims, right? In the plant-based area, they aren't, but to support his opinions, they are. So I would say he's contradicting himself big time.
And also the meta-analyses, they actually have a sorting procedure in which they exclude studies. So they, and then at the end also they do such things such as assess for publication bias and stuff. So it's not like they just cherry pick what they want to include in the meta-analyses.
So in addition to study design, research can often be compromised by using poor outcome measures. This is particularly common in studies that seem to promote vegan diets. This often includes surrogate markers which serve as proxies for meaningful clinical outcomes, and the use of proxies or surrogate markers is unfortunately rife. The utility of some outcome measures is obvious. Did you die? It's hard to argue that this is neither meaningful nor relevant, and it's also very hard to fudge. What about LDL cholesterol though? A common surrogate marker used in nutritional research and assumed to associate with the chance of dying. Except the best research we have suggests this association doesn't exist. The overwhelming finding of this systematic review of 19 cohort studies with more than 68,000 participants was that.
So earlier on, he sort of criticized systematic reviews, and then now he's sharing one, and this is the one which all the carnivores they love. Because it's not meta-analysis. Yeah, go ahead.
Not only that, but he also criticized observational research, right? These are cohorts. So he criticized epidemiology, but now is using it to prove his point or to justify his. Like, either you don't think epidemiology is strong science, so you don't use it, or you do think it's strong science, and then you follow all of it. Like, you can't just pick and choose. Like, that's literally cherry picking. You can't pick, oh, actually epidemiology works for this as systematic review, but not for the other ones.
And yeah, I'm just checking the other one he shared on B12. That was it a narrative review?
Using a PubMed search to identify relevant publications. 18 articles were found that reported. So they used 18 articles from PubMed. I don't know.
Yeah, so it could be just like a narrative review.
Where they just went in and picked the 18 articles.
There is no credible evidence to the contrary. The less 68,000 participants was that.
So 1 minute, I'll just go back.
Suggests this association doesn't exist. The overwhelming finding of this systematic review of 19 cohort studies with more than 68,000 participants was that the higher the LDL level, the less chance of dying. There is no.
So yeah, there's something it's known as like the LDL paradox, obesity paradox. So it's like U-shaped associations are pretty common, and like when you don't adjust for the fact that people, when they get ill, they can have a drop in LDL cholesterol levels, and then they shortly afterwards they have potentially an event or a death. So this needs to be adjusted for, and there was a cool paper which I did a reel on where they adjusted for like a 2-year lag, and then once you adjust for the 2-year lag, the association gets rid of this U or J shape, and so that's what needs to be adjusted for. And I think I had a look at this paper ages ago, and it's just literally just picking one study at a time. So it doesn't do a meta-analysis on it, and I believe that a lot of the studies didn't actually adjust for this.
I think Matthew Nagra makes a great point too, where when we're looking at, because the claim is that when you have the higher the LDL, the less risk of mortality or less risk of cardiovascular disease, whatever they say, right? A lot of those cases are comparing to individuals who've already had a cardiovascular event and therefore were put on a statin. And statins lower your cholesterol, right? So if you're comparing an individual who has a higher LDL but hasn't had any cardiac event or cardiovascular disease event or whatever, and you compare that to people with lower LDL but who are on statins, the people that have already had a cardiac event and are on statins can still be at a higher risk of dying versus people who have higher LDL but haven't had any intervention or haven't had any cardiac event yet. And that's something that a lot of times they don't adjust for, which, and Dr. Matthew, I don't know if he was talking about this paper specifically, but he was talking about that, how that's important to look at. You have to look at who's on cholesterol lowering medication, because yes, their cholesterol might be lower when you measure their cholesterol, but overall their risk could be higher because they may have had higher cholesterol for longer. They may already have had a cardiac event, stuff like that, compared to people who haven't. So that's also something to look at.
Yeah, and I'm reading, it says one explanation for the increased risk of mortality among people with low cholesterol is that serious diseases may lower cholesterol soon before death occurs. 10 of the studies did not make exclusions for individuals with terminal illnesses.
Okay, well that's 10. How many studies were there? What did they say? Like 19 or something? So that's already more than half.
Let me have a look. So 19 cohort studies, including 30 cohorts.
So more than half of them, they didn't adjust or exclude due to terminal illness. So that could already be a great explanation.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. But yeah, they also did mention something about the statins. Yeah, it's worth considering that some of the participants with high LDL cholesterol may have started statin treatment during the observation period.
Yeah, so again, if you start a statin, sure, your cholesterol is going to go down and it may prolong your life a little bit, but you could still be at higher risk compared to somebody who hasn't had a cardiac event. Or maybe who genetically, like, more protected or something.
Yeah, if people want, I can look into the study a little bit more and make a reel on it because it keeps on coming up.
Yeah.
So
no, you should.
So yeah, I should look into it.
No credible evidence to the contrary. Use of LDL as a surrogate marker, while being common in nutritional research, is indefensible. And
so I'll add that there's LDL cholesterol is actually it's like imperfect surrogate for something known as ApoB. Have you heard of ApoB?
Yeah, I've vaguely heard of ApoB, but I'm not that well versed on it.
So like to briefly explain it to you, LDL cholesterol, when you get your LDL cholesterol measured, it measures the total amount of LDL cholesterol inside LDL particles, right? And LDL particles, they're atherogenic, but there's also other types of particles as well, such as intermediate density IDLs, and then there's also LP little a, and then all of these have a tag on it known as ApoB. And then, so basically any particle with an ApoB tag is atherogenic, so it can lead to atherosclerosis when it builds up. And so the ApoB blood test, it measures the total amount of these particles you have. So someone could theoretically have high LDL cholesterol, but the particles are very big, so they have very few particles. So this is why it's an imperfect measure, because normally the more people, the higher LDL cholesterol, the more particles you have, which could be atherogenic. But for me, for example, my LDL cholesterol is a lot higher than my ApoB, so which suggests, for example, that I have big LDL cholesterol particles, because my ApoB is really low, but my LDL cholesterol is high. So LDL cholesterol is just the amount of cholesterol inside the particles, while ApoB is the number of particles.
Okay, interesting. So so what we're looking at when it comes to heart disease, it's not really the cholesterol, it's the ApoB that's attached to the cholesterol.
So just like atherogenic particles have this, this tag, this ApoB tag, and the more particles that you have, the higher your risk of atherosclerosis.
Got it.
And
cool.
And so when there's a discordance, it's like all things being held equal. If there's a discordance, if your LDL cholesterol is low but your ApoB is high, then it's not necessarily a good thing, because you've still got lots of particles in your bloodstream.
Got it. Okay, interesting.
But I have discordance in that my ApoB is super low, but my LDL cholesterol is not too bad. It's not the best, but yeah. This time, the last time I did my blood test, I don't really eat too much vegetable oils, but I'm starting to incorporate a little bit of vegetable oils more into my diet.
Makes sense.
Because the last time I took my blood test, it was during the Christmas period, and I was having lots of vegan cheeses high in coconut.
Nah, I can't get. I gotta get my blood work done in like the summer, because if it's around the holiday time, I mean, vegan cookies, vegan cakes, I'm done for.
Yeah, and they're all like vegan cheeses I had. I think they were high in coconut oil, which is sort of in the middle between vegetable oils and butter in terms of raising your cholesterol. So it's not necessarily. Many people think coconut fat is really healthy, but it should be, from what I've seen, consumed in moderation.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because if you add vegetable oils, your LDL cholesterol and ApoB will tend to go lower. So how much do you want to continue next week with this video?
Sure. Yeah, I'm down. It's cool. I don't know if you want to do a few more minutes, but if you're if we're gonna call it, I'm cool with continuing.
No, we can see what people want.
Oh yeah, how's everyone in the chat? Oh god, how long does this garbage go on for? It's endless CDA activism. It doesn't end, and we're here enduring it. So
yeah, CDA activism, right? Tim Sheaf drank his own urine.
Oh, funny enough. So do you guys know who Tim Pool is? Tim Pool.
No.
People, I don't know if it's because of the hat, but whenever I have a video with a hat on, people keep calling me Tim Pool. So as like an insult. So I would like to know if anybody who knows who Tim Pool is. I would like to know who he is.
Okay, guys, everyone, friends. Yeah, if you know who Tim Pool is, let logical consistency know.
Because I Googled him. Like, I kind of look like him with the hat. It's kind of funny. But I just want to know, like, why people... I don't know if he was vegan or what. I don't know. I couldn't really find too much info.
But if anyone lets you know, give them a shout out.
Yeah, okay, I will.
Okay, so... Animals are here with us, not for us, says, I guess this is over now. Not really, we're like a quarter of the way through. But we're deciding whether we should continue. CD Activism says you can stay on and watch something good.
Yeah, rings a bell.
You don't look like him.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, I mean, I'm down. If somebody has a recommendation in the chat or something, it's up to you also, because I know it's late by you. So
no, it's okay. Like I can stay a little bit longer.
Okay.
But,
yeah,
we can keep on going. If someone has a request, send it in. Otherwise, we'll continue with Dr. Paul Mason.
So you now know to be suspicious. The next time you see a vegan wheeling out associational studies based on food frequency questionnaires or similar, or experimental designs using weak surrogate markers, you know now how to interpret the quality of some of this science. Now,
oh my God, he's creating an army. He's like, now you know that when anyone brings up a study, just call them stupid and walk away. It's like, that's horrible advice.
And yeah, CT Activism is writing we can't put the links in the chat because we're not mods. I don't know. I don't know that you cannot put links in the chat.
What's the title?
Give us a title and we'll find it. But it's funny that he hasn't actually mentioned any randomized controlled trials up to this point, because there are, randomized controlled trials which confirm observational research.
He hasn't mentioned much of anything. Again, he mentioned headlines. He's had some interesting photos, and that's about it. A lot of it's like speculation. He did bring up that one meta-analysis of the disproving like the link between LDL and
it wasn't even a meta-analysis. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just
yeah.
Systematic review, and there are long-term RCTs like the Leon Diet heart study, which he hasn't mentioned, and there's like RCTs looking at the Mediterranean diet in terms of nuts and olive oil consumption.
What about the Mendelian? I heard the Mendelian randomization, right? That one's pretty good, where they looked at the people who are genetically high with who have genetically high cholesterol, right?
Yeah, and then just confirming the findings, right? Just different lines of evidence pointing towards the same thing.
Yeah.
But if randomized controlled trials, the results are also based on associations on what you see in the two groups.
Yeah.
So CTA activism, if you have a title of a video, we can find it, or you can send it to us on Instagram.
Oh yeah, you could always send it on Instagram. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Do we want something pseudoscientific or just funny?
That's on you. Whatever you want.
Now, one of the biggest claims made against red meat is that it causes bowel cancer. You may remember in 2015, the World Health Organization released this 2-page report that resulted in a worldwide media frenzy. Paraphrasing Dr. Georgia Eade, who has a great analysis on her website, it's not so much a scientific report as it is a political hit job. Let's start with unprocessed red meat. Now, there are more than 800 observational studies in the literature looking at red meat and cancer. And the authors of this review considered 29. And even then, things didn't really go so well, as the majority that they looked at found no issue with unprocessed red meat. And as you know, observational studies are weak anyway, even if a...
So I'll add that it depends a lot on the dose as well. Like there's some studies looking at red meat consumption with just such a low dose, like a bite of red meat, which is, you know, we wouldn't expect necessarily see an increase in risk for colorectal cancer with that. Like I did Lane Norton, he always cites the same study from the Alberta project. And yeah, in this study, for example, the red meat was very low, the consumption.
Yeah, it's not enough just to say, oh, 15 say it's good, 15 say it's bad, so we don't know anything. You got to look at the details in each individual study. Because, yeah, the doses could be different, the controls could be different, or the adjustments. So I always found that to be weird.